law enforcement in Lancashire, England, received an anonymous tip in February of 2017, informing them that 25-year-old Rossendale woman Rhiannon Ferguson was operating as a drug trafficker. Local police consequently began undercover surveillance on the young woman. On April the 27th of 2017, she travelled to the Walton area of Liverpool and met with 41-year-old Christopher Harrison, from whom she picked up a package. Ferguson's car was tracked by law enforcement and stopped on the M6 motorway. A search of the vehicle produced over 6.6 pounds of cocaine, with an estimated street value of close to $500,000. At the time, it was reported as the largest in-transit drug bust to have ever occurred in Lancashire. Once her mugshot surfaced online, media outlets and internet users were quick to remark upon the discrepancy between Ferguson's no-makeup, straight-face processing photo taken while she was wearing a black hoodie and the glamour shots that the reported party girl would regularly post on her social media. The contrast highlighted the double life that the young woman was leading. In the aftermath of her and Harrison's arrests, the latter pleaded guilty to supplying a Class A drug, while Ferguson pleaded guilty to possession of a Class A drug with intent to supply. In the fall of 2017, they were each jailed for 7 years. Number 6. Rihanna Bell Brook. Rihanna Bell Brook, a young woman from Kentucky, came to be known as the Queen of Chaos, as she was arrested at least 11 times from 2018 to 2023. Brook went viral after sharing her collection of mugshots, some of which showed the party girl displaying a wide grin and talking about the stories behind them. Her mugshots also earned online attention after being posed on the public Mug Shorties account on Instagram. One user described Brook as so cute but equally a menace. The incidents for which the former East Kentucky University student was arrested spanned from when she was 18 years old to her turning 23. On March the 6th of 2018, she was arrested for wanton endangerment of a police officer, evading law enforcement, and shoplifting. Her second mugshot on record was taken just hours later on March the 7th, when she was again arrested for the same crimes, following several other arrests for probation violations and failure to appear in court. Brook was taken into custody in the summer of 2020 for making extremist threats and stalking. Brook claimed that her favorite mugshot was the one from September the 16th of 2020. The photo showed Brook with slicked back blonde hair and smiling for the camera after she'd been arrested for contempt of court. Other charges on Brook's extensive rap sheet stemmed from incidents that included stealing a car and driving it back to her dorm, stealing a hat and taser from a state trooper's vehicle, and multiple instances of drug possession. Her mugshot count reached double digits, following 2 successive firearm theft charges in 2022 and January of 2023. According to her social media posts from June of 2023, Brook had gotten sober and turned to religion. She thanked friend Bernard Hoskins, whom she credited with saving her life by always being by her side. At the time, she was on a pre-trial diversion 1-year correction course in the wake of her latest firearm charge. Number 5. Incident in Belfast. In the spring of 2019, a homeowner from Belfast, Northern Ireland, revealed the destruction caused to his apartment after he'd rented it out. A woman had purchased a one-night stay for her 16-year-old daughter, who'd secretly been planning a party on Snapchat. On a Saturday night in April, she invited friends to the apartment in spite of the owner, William, barring parties from being held at the residence. Roughly 40 youths descended on the home, advertisers being at a 6-minute walk from the waterfront hall. Residents reported that some of those who'd arrived at the scene had climbed the building's railings while trying to get inside. Neighbors feared their homes would be attacked and called the police, but had to wait nearly an hour for officers to arrive and break up the party. A neighbor who lived on the first floor of the complex was interviewed by the Belfast Telegraph and reported deafening noise coming from the apartment as what she described as an indoor riot unfolded. William later told the media The extent of the destruction is unbelievable. It makes me sick to the bottom of my stomach. They used sledgehammers to make a hole in the wall between the kitchen and the hall. Additionally, they smashed doors, windows, mirrors, appliances, and ripped furniture apart. The damage was estimated at over $50,000, which William claimed he'd have to pay on his own as he didn't expect the family or the booking site to compensate him. The female teenager who'd held the party was subsequently arrested. Number 4. Isabel Quintero. In May of 2021, officers from the Albuquerque Police Department were called to a roadway in the area of Vistazo Place. Upon reaching the scene, they found that 22-year-old Isabel Quintero had struck several vehicles before stopping her Mazda convertible at an off-ramp. Quintero, who was described as a party girl, was severely intoxicated to the extent that she was initially unable to open her car doors. She only did so after officers had started forcefully knocking on her windows. Quintero got out with her sunglasses stuck to the side of her hair. She had an absent look on her face, slurred her words, and swayed when trying to stand upright. She briefly resisted officers upon being handcuffed and led to the back of a cruiser. Her processing took several hours given her inebriated state. During that time, Quintero refused to take a breathalyzer and was shown laughing and exclaiming, "This is fun," on body cam footage. While in a holding cell, she started dancing and talking to herself while repeating the words, "Go ahead though." She cursed at officers, and at one point, she bent over and started moaning suggestively. Officers again struggled to place Quintero in a police cruiser as they took her to a hospital for tests. She twisted, screamed, and again made suggestive noises. While handcuffed to a chair at the medical facility, she persisted in her belligerent behavior and at one point was reported to have urinated on the hospital floor. Quintero told an officer that she was a paralegal, and when the officer expressed disbelief, she replied, "Have you seen how hot I am?" After a 5-hour ordeal, she was processed and had her mugshot taken. She was booked on aggravated DWI, reckless driving, having an open container, possession of a controlled substance, and possession of an altered license. It was later reported that the charges were dropped because the arresting officer hadn't appeared in court. Number 3. Dixie Styles and Macy Regan. Assistance from the Bay County Sheriff's Office in Florida was requested on July the 4th of 2023 following a party gone wrong at an Aloki Street residence. At around midnight, 23-year-old Macy Regan tried to leave the party, which had reportedly been thrown by unsupervised minors, and walked to her house, which was next door. She was confronted by 18-year-old Dixie Styles, who reportedly accused her of having pilfered vape pens and alcohol. Regan responded by brandishing a 9mm pistol from her waistband and pointing it at her. Styles was able to push the weapon away and a fight ensued. Both women suffered scrapes and bruises during the brawl, which culminated with Regan biting the top of Styles' ear off. They were arrested and each shown wearing the damage they'd sustained in the altercation in their respective mugshots. Styles was smiling and wearing a bandage around her head, while her rival's booking photo showed her with a black eye. The case was still under investigation as of the latest updates, but records indicated that Styles was charged with battery, while Regan faced a charge of felony battery causing bodily harm. Number 2. Dina Cortese. In the summer of 2012, during filming for the 6th season of the MTV reality show Jersey Shore, one of the production stars was arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Dina Cortese, who was at the time in her mid-20s, was pictured dancing on the tables at an eatery in Seaside Heights. She was also seen steadying herself on a giant cartoon pig model and curled up next to a large plush toy. While MTV crews were filming, Cortese started dancing in the middle of the street and slapping passing cars. Footage would show responding police officers seemingly tolerating her behavior for a few moments before they moved in to handcuff and arrest the reality star. She was placed in the back of a cop car and charged with disorderly conduct. While speaking to an NBC affiliate, Police Chief Tommy Boyd described the incident as minor but sternly noted, "We don't treat the cast differently than anyone else." Cortese was later pictured in the company of her parents and seemingly shamefaced following her release from the police station. We have our earlier release on When Halloween Goes Wrong lined up for you immediately after number 1. Stay put if you'd like. Number 1. Victoria Vanstone. 45-year-old Victoria Vanstone, a mother of 3 from Australia's Sunshine Coast, revealed during a 2022 interview the heavy toll that her party girl lifestyle had taken on her overall health. Before getting completely sober in March of 2018, Vanstone admitted that she was incapable of moderation when she went out. It resulted in several incidents, one of which left Vanstone permanently damaged in its aftermath. At the turn of the millennium in 1999, she lit up a firecracker while intoxicated in Thailand. It exploded in her hand and half of her middle finger was blown off. Other occurrences stemming from her drinking resulted in the woman spending a night in jail or being hosed down by her husband in the shower after she'd thrown up all over herself during a taxi ride. Vanstone would reportedly get sober while she was pregnant, but afterwards reverted to heavy alcohol consumption. She began to consider quitting because her lifestyle had left her with panic attacks and anxiety that rendered her unable to properly care for her children. By 2022, she'd stopped drinking for over 4 years and co-hosted the Sober Awkward podcast. In addition to running a social network for those abstaining from drinking, Vanstone revealed that her struggle with substance abuse had started in her early teens and gradually ramped up. Looking back on her choices, Vanstone told a media outlet, "I became a party girl, the sort of person people come to have fun." Number 8. William Liske. On October 31st of 2010, teenager Devin Griffin arrived at his mother's home in Benton Township, Ohio, after spending the weekend with his father. Devin only stayed long enough to change his shirt and then left to attend the morning church service. Upon his return, he went to his room and started playing video games, but in the afternoon, noticed that the house was uncharacteristically quiet. He went to check the room shared by his mother, 46-year-old Susan, and stepfather, William Liske, aged 53. He received no answer upon knocking and entered the room to find them completely under the covers. He tried waking them up but was unsuccessful. Then as he pulled back the comforter, Devin was faced with their dead bodies covered in blood. He was in shock and at first believed the gruesome sight to be a Halloween prank, but then realized the horrific reality. Distraught, he ran out of the house and called an aunt who consequently contacted the authorities. Devin would later learn that his brother Derek, aged 23, had also been murdered in his room. The killer was identified as William Liske's son and Devin's stepbrother, 24-year-old William B.J. Liske. He was later arrested at his family's cabin near Scio. In his teens, Liske had been diagnosed with a schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and had spent time in mental health facilities. He was often in trouble with the authorities and on several occasions had lashed out against his father and stepmother with physical violence. On Halloween, he first went to Derek's room and, as he was sleeping, bludgeoned him to death with both ends of a claw hammer. He then locked the door behind him, heading to Susan and his father's bedroom, where they were both sleeping. He shot William 5 times in the head and face with a .22 caliber handgun and then shot Susan 3 times, killing her as well. He also abused his stepmother, but it's unclear if this occurred before or after he'd executed her. The awkward position in which her body was found seemingly supported the latter. Devin would tell investigators that when he'd arrived at the house to change for church, he'd talked to Liske for a few minutes as he was leaving for the hunting cabin. The teenager would report that his stepbrother seemed to be in a surprisingly talkative and positive mood, which contrasted his usual sullen demeanor. Liske pleaded guilty to the triple homicide and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2011. On March the 31st of 2015, he was found dead in his cell after succumbing to self-inflicted wounds. Number 7. Chelsea Brook. In 2014, a 22-year-old woman was killed in the Frenchtown Township of Michigan. Chelsea Brook was last seen on October the 26th at a Halloween party where she'd gone dressed as Batman villain Poison Ivy. Roughly 6 months later, after Brook's disappearance, her unclothed body was found abandoned in nearby woods. The authorities unequivocally confirmed that she'd been killed by Daniel Clay, a man in his mid-20s who was arrested in 2016 based on DNA evidence recovered from Brook's costume. However, according to his version of events, he'd never meant to kill Brook. Clay reported that after a night of using drugs and alcohol at the party, he'd spotted her on the road and offered her a ride. He claimed that they then engaged in rough intercourse in his car and that he'd accidentally choked her to death. In court, he would state, "I didn't mean for it to end like this, considering the manner in which he discarded her body." Prosecutors argued that his only regret was having been caught. Additionally, there were signs of physical trauma indicating that Brook had been repeatedly hit in the face. Clay denied attacking her. He was ultimately given a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 6. Rebecca J. Kade. Ohio woman Rebecca J. Kade of Chillicothe was brutally murdered in October of 2015, and her remains were at first misidentified as a Halloween decoration. 31-year-old Kade was found hanging by the sleeve of her sweatshirt from a chain-link fence near an electric substation, and contractors working in the area initially believed she was a mannequin. As they got closer and attempted to remove her, they, much to their horror, realized that they were dealing with human remains. Kade had been bludgeoned, stabbed, and there was a burn mark on her back that had been made through 3 layers of clothing. Her face featured 2 stab wounds, each about 2 inches deep, which had left her unrecognizable, while her neck and torso were covered in additional injuries. She had fought back against her attacker with such desperation that one of her bicep muscles was severed, while the other was nearly torn off. Investigators postulated that she may have tried to climb the fence and flee her attacker before succumbing to her injuries. In the aftermath, 27-year-old Donnie Coconor Jr. was arrested and charged with her murder. A testimony from the man's sister, Lisa Frost, highlighted him as the prime suspect. She claimed that he'd gone to her home about 400 yards from the crime scene to take a shower and that there was blood and mud on his clothes. Frost also reported that Coconor had admitted to having fought with Kade and confessed he might have killed her. Upon being interrogated, Coconor told the police that he and Kade had had consensual intercourse on the night of her death and that afterwards there had been an argument between them which escalated into a physical altercation, yet he denied killing her. Coconor's sister would later reveal to the authorities that she'd lied about her brother's confession, blaming the false testimony on her heroin addiction. Frost reported that the blood on his clothes had been from him being attacked in a separate incident on the night. She spent a year in jail for evidence tampering. Once she got clean, Frost insisted on setting the record straight. In 2017, a jury was initially deadlocked, but eventually, after being asked by the judge to deliberate further, found Coconor not guilty. Number 5. Christopher Williams and Rebecca Kevin. Christopher Williams and his girlfriend Rebecca Kevin, both in their 20s, were attacked on Halloween 2019 while on a romantic getaway to Paris. After spending the night of October the 31st at a party, the British couple began the 10-minute walk back to their hotel in the early hours of the morning. 4 Frenchmen in a hatchback of estimated ages ranging from late teens to early 20s pulled up alongside the couple and started harassing Kevin, who was wearing a bunny girl costume. Williams, who was dressed as the Grim Reaper, positioned himself between them and his girlfriend. One of the occupants then yanked his arm and pulled it through the open passenger side window. The driver then accelerated and the Liverpool man was dragged roughly 160 feet at over 30 miles per hour up the Rue de la Roquette. He was then dropped and the group proceeded to beat him. He was stomped on, kicked and punched. Kevin chased after them and tried to intervene, at which point she was also struck in the face repeatedly. The 3-minute-long attack was broken up as pedestrians gathered on the street. Both Williams and Kevin had sustained broken noses and heavy facial bruising in what the couple described as a genuine Halloween nightmare. Williams was also left with a chipped tooth, while Kevin suffered a fractured finger. They reported the assault to the police, but it's unclear what arrests were made in the aftermath. Number 4. Madrid Arena Stampede. In 2012, a deadly stampede occurred during a Halloween party at the Madrid Arena, resulting in the death of 5 female attendees, all of whom were in the late teens and early 20s. Panic had overtaken the crowd, which had gathered at the venue during an event called Thriller Music Park, headlined by DJ Steve Aoki. The cause wasn't immediately identified, but it was later reported that the crush had been triggered by a flare being set off. It didn't take place on the dance floor, but in a passage of terror on a lower level, which was connected to the main floor via a stairwell. In the panic-driven chaos, Concert-goers trampled each other in the narrow passageway. Roughly 50 medical personnel were called to the venue at around 4 a.m. 2 of the victims succumbed to cardiac arrest at the scene, while the other 3 passed away at the hospital. It took the authorities 3 hours following the incident to clear the arena. In the tragedy's aftermath, the event's promoter was given a 4-year jail term for negligent homicide after it emerged that 17,000 tickets had been sold, while the arena had been authorized to admit entry to only 10,600 people. Number 3. Carl Gerard. On Halloween 2020, in what local authorities described as a night of horror, a man dressed in a medieval costume carried out a mass stabbing in Quebec City, Canada. The attacker was 24-year-old Carl Gerard, and by all accounts he'd chosen his victims at random. Gerard didn't have a criminal record and his motives remained unclear, but it was reported that he had a history of mental illness and that he'd threatened violence against others in the past. He wasn't a resident of the city and, according to Quebec City Police Chief Robert Pidgeon, had traveled there with the express intention of doing the most damage possible. Armed with a katana-like sword, he carried out attacks at 4 different locations. 61-year-old Suzanne Clermont and Francois Deschênes, aged 56, were killed while 5 others were injured. One of the victims was butchered extensively and exhibited a piercing wound that went through the upper torso. Survivors had severe lacerations but were deemed to be outside mortal danger. Gerard's rampage lasted for over 2 hours before he was apprehended without incident, as he was found barefoot and lying on the ground, exhibiting signs of hypothermia. From his car, the police retrieved multiple gasoline containers. In the wake of his rampage, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. Number 2. Shooting at Long Beach House. On October the 29th of 2019, a gang-related shooting occurred at a Halloween-themed party in Long Beach, California. Chanchenda Howe, the man who rented the single-story home near Temple Avenue, would later tell investigators that the party was hosted by his son for one of his co-workers. Around 30 people were in attendance when gunfire erupted and a hail of bullets descended upon the property's backyard. 35-year-old Melvin Williams II, along with Morris Poe Jr. and Ricardo Torres, both in their 20s, were pronounced dead at the scene. 9 others were injured. Howe's son, Daniel Chan, reported hearing a man dressed in all black shout out, "Are you prepared to die tonight?" and then fleeing the scene about an hour before the shooting commenced. It would later emerge that a Long Beach gang had misidentified the Halloween party as one put together by their rivals. Contrasting their beliefs, none of the guests had any known criminal affiliations. Initially, the investigation had limited leads, but by 2020, a dozen suspects were arrested, several of whom were charged with murder as the active gunmen. They traveled in 3 SUVs from North Long Beach and shot the gathering from an alley adjacent to the property in the 2700 block of East 7th Street. Number 1. Carly Rae Barron. On Halloween night 2020, a verbal altercation escalated dramatically and resulted in the shooting of a young woman in Wilmington, North Carolina. Officers were investigating a noise complaint in the area, and they converged at the 3600 block of Wrightsville Avenue upon hearing the sound of gunfire. After a traffic collision, 21-year-old Jaquan Cortez Jackson was arguing with a group of which 23-year-old Carly Rae Barron is believed to have been a part. Jackson discharged a firearm during the dispute and struck Barron, inflicting critical injuries. Arriving officers saw a vehicle speeding away. One member of law enforcement attempted to save the life of the victim, while the other pursued Jackson, who was stopped and detained. Barron was later pronounced dead at a local hospital. Jackson was charged with second-degree murder and held at the New Hanover County Jail under a $750,000 secured bond. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have free alcohol for the rest of your life or the ability to park anywhere you wanted? Let us know in the comments section below.